this meeting to order. The time is 7 p.m. We have no public comments for posted agenda items today. I'll now turn the floor over to Mrs. Terry Moore, Associate Superintendent for Accountability and Strategic Planning, who will facilitate the development of the strategic plan with the Board of Trustees for Galena Park I.S.D. Ms. Moore?
Correction, the time is set 4 o'clock. 4:30, I'm sorry, not 7 o'clock.
4:30 p.m.
4:30.
What is 7 o'clock?
Yes, Ms. Johnson, can you hear us? Okay, very good. And you do have access to your packet we emailed you today? Okay, and I'll call out slide numbers to you as we go through to if you want to follow with us. Okay, well then, good afternoon, everyone. You should have a packet there in front of you titled Strategic Planning and Board of Trustees Goal Setting. We have a couple of objectives to cover today. The first is I'd like you guys to decide on the direction we're going to go in with our strategic plan. And I have the 3 options available for you guys. And if you do choose one of the newer directions, and then we have a couple of decisions to make beyond then. I will go relatively fast through the beginning part. If you need me to slow down or repeat, please just stop and ask questions. Okay? So if you'll turn to the first page of your packet, you can see the 3 paths we could take as a school district as it relates to our board goals and the directions we're going in. The first path we can take is to make absolutely no change to our goal process. Just leave it as is moving forward, and we'll kind of go over what the current process is in a minute. Or we can keep a similar process but add SMART goals, which are similar to strategic development plans for the 3 to 5 year range. Or we can start transitioning to a more strategic and long-term process, which includes pillars and scorecards, which I'll show you. It seems to be the trend. It adds accountability to the district. It also adds some transparency. And so as we go through, I'll show you what each of them would look like. The first option is to make absolutely no change. Our current process for setting goals is our district leadership recommends 3 to 5 goals with the objectives for each, which you, as the Board of Trustees, review and approve. Following that, then the district leadership team determines which actions will address each of the goals and strategies. And as a summative at the end of the year, we report all of the actions taken to address each of those objectives. So that is the current way we handle our board goals and objectives. You can see currently we have the 5 goals that you have reviewed and approved recently, and we just have them there for your review. You can see we have one for the mental, physical, and emotional safety of our students and staff. We have a goal related to student achievement and post-secondary readiness, a goal related to offering a wide range of student opportunities, high-quality staff, and operational and fiscal support and responsibility. Path 2 we could take, if you are looking for some change, is we can keep a similar process with the goals and objectives, but include SMART goals for the objectives. We would have 3 to 5 goals determined by the Board of Trustees or district leadership with your approval. The district leadership would then determine the objectives and strategies and include a long-term measurable outcome for you. And then as a summative, it would be very similar to what you are used to now. We would report progress as it relates to those measurable long-term targets. The next page you see is just a reminder for you what the SMART goal would include if that's the direction you want to go in. As a team, we would be very specific about what is being measured. There would be a measurability to each of the objectives, and meaning that there has to be something that can be measured within that objective. It has to be attainable, which means it's realistic, and relevant or worthwhile for us doing over long term, and timely, which means we would measure either annual targets or give you measures we want to hit along the way. Path 3 is the trend we're seeing in some school districts. It's all about visionary pillars and scorecards. So rather than having the 5 very specific goals with specific objectives, you as the leadership team of the school district determine the different pillars we would work in. So these would be long-term focus areas for us as a school district. And within each pillar, you identify what the key performance indicators you want to be. And then the district leadership team measures those key performance indicators throughout the school year. So it adds a lot of transparency. So we're measuring what's in the goals. This, you would determine what the key performance indicators would be, and we would provide those measurements to you throughout the school year. So throughout the school year, you would be watching the data of the areas you identified as a performance area for us. We would include a dashboard, and I'll show you an example of the dashboards where you could log into the dashboard at any time to see what the current data is, and we would report our dashboard to you throughout the year. And as a summative, then the district then produces basically a report card on all of these key performance indicators you had identified. We then provide you with report cards of all the measurable data and where we made gains throughout the school year. And so the pillars and goals, as an example, you guys as the Board of Trustees would identify the 3 to 5 critical focus areas in the school district. For an example, you would identify the 4 that I'm giving as a sample would be that we would focus on students, we would focus on the community, which includes our parents and stakeholders, we would have a focus on the staff and employees, and then a focus on the district itself. And then within those 4 pillars, or 5 pillars, however many you determine, you then would set 2 to 3 requirements or expectations as a goal within those pillars. And the example I'm giving you, and please keep in mind, this is only an example that I pulled so that you can see how it would function. The 2 goals for each of the pillars would be to have appropriate and effective systems within that focus area, and that we would show success in each of the pillars. So what it's saying is these are the 4 areas, but within each area, we want systems and we want success.
Terry,
Yes, sir.
why are we calling them pillars? I know education has their own language, but that's a strange word, and it leaves me cold.
It does not have to be called pillars. It's only pillars because in the research, that's the models that we're seeing out there that they're called pillars. We could certainly call them the goal areas. We could call them our commitments. We could call them whatever word feels comfortable to you guys. The word pillars
I'm just
is
asking.
optional.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
And so is with the goals, or any of the words themselves are optional. Okay. And then so you can see on the next slide, just what it would start be built as a strategic plan. You can see that we would identify the 4 focus areas or pillars, or whichever word we determine they would be called. And within each of those pillars would be the 2 to 3 goals. The goals do not have to be the same for all 4 pillars. So that's just the sample I have. If you wanted different goals for the district, focus area from the student, that certainly would be at your discretion if we went this route. And then you can see under each of them, we met with our cabinet and our leadership team and our extended cabinet to kind of brainstorm what would be some of the areas. We also looked at the surveys you completed and our district leaders completed for the areas in here. So you can see on your slide that under systems for students, What you in your survey told us that it was very important that students are ready for their future. And so that this goal would read that the systems we have in place would ensure our students are exposed to the opportunities or the programs that they need to be ready for their future. And then under success is that our students would be engaged, successful, feel safe, and feel valued. And each of those things could be measured either through surveys or other areas. Under the community and stakeholders, the systems we brainstormed were that our systems and our process and our procedures would ensure that our parents and stakeholders felt welcome and invited. And we can measure the opportunities for those, and that the success measure would be that they're engaged, respected, and valued as stakeholders. And then you can see for the employees and the district, same things, same opportunities, that we have a systems identified and as well as a success identified under each of the areas. And again, where we got these from were from your surveys, our campus leadership team surveys, and the district leadership team surveys. The strategies and the objectives underneath each of the areas would come from either long-term focus areas that are decided. For example, our teachers' incentive allotment that we're in the planning stages of starting would certainly need to be one of the objectives under one of the systems, as well as any of our required components that are required to be part of our board goals. Our early literacy and math goals would have to be included as one of our objectives, as well as the CCMR goals, since those are required to be part of our board goals. Also, as part of our strategies and objectives, if you were looking at the dashboard at the end of each year, you could set an area for improvement needed based on the data on the dashboard. So as you watch the key performance indicators at the end of the year, you can always say, this number's not where we want it to be. Can we set this as an area of improvement, which could also include a SMART goal? And then, of course, always annual survey results could give us the areas to target in. The next few pages, just to go very quickly, are some of the examples of the things that would be included under each of the pillars. You can see under students, the state test performance, each of these areas that as part of your survey you said was an important area or it's a required area. And each of these things can be measured with data provided frequently, quarterly, or even annually. And then you can see the samples under the community, the parents and the community stakeholders, where we could set objectives under each of those. Under employees, we included things like the recruiting and retention incentives. So if you were interested in the retention rate of employees or the retention rate of teachers, that could be measured within that area. And then the fourth area, the district, things like the budget management, our employee pay and benefits, our district compliance with federal requirements, and our federal accountability and state accountability, as well as other operational areas. And what the implementation of that model would be, you guys would receive quarterly reports from the district leadership team with an updated dashboard, a summary report in June with our report card, and certainly the superintendent's evaluation could be tied to the dashboard or the key performance indicators. All right, the next few pages are just to give you some examples of what the dashboard would look like. The first page you see is some of just our general information from the school district with our dashboard. This would include a measure for each area you determined was a key performance indicator. So what you're seeing right now is just some of our basic information. The second page of your dashboard is our current accountability dashboard that you see the CBBAA across the top. That is the current dashboard for our accountability right now that we update at the end of each year. You can see it includes historical data as well as current data. And what we would include that we do not have on any of these now is we would have the ranges of acceptability for you guys. Like, you know, if it's above the state average or higher than the state average or below the state average, you guys would be able to determine that at just a glance to see how we're performing as a school district. And then the last dashboard is our current CCMR, our College and Career Readiness dashboard. You can see at last year's measure, we were at 78%. And then you can see the 3 historical measures for those indicators, as well as each of the individual indicators. Now, on the dashboard, they're much larger. These are screenshots of our dashboard and included as a photo right now. So as a dashboard, these are much larger, and you can click on them and go deeper into the data. So each of these graphics has clickable that will lead you directly to the reports. Okay?
Why do we call them dashboards?
They're that's the term, that's the technological term of dashboard, and that it includes just a quick glance of many different measures that you can see, and the dashboard would include whichever measures you wanted it to include.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
And then you have a couple of pages that are just some sample scorecards for the end of the year. We would build this with what you want to see on the scorecard for the end of the school year. And then the remaining pages of your packet that we can go over if you want, but the remaining pages are the survey results, the surveys you did, the surveys our district leadership teams did, and then the surveys our campus leadership teams did. And so this is just a compilation of all of the results where we got the objectives under each of the focus areas or the pillars. So if you'll say, why did y'all include this? It was because it was scored lower on the surveys as a result. So we took all of the survey results and included them in the samples for you, okay? So what we need from you guys is really the first thing is the determination. Do we stay exactly like we are with the 3 to 5 goals? We set the objectives and nothing changes. It looks just very similar to what we're doing now. Yes, sir.
I'm overwhelmed with this information and not in a position to have had this, seen it, and thought about it to make a decision about which one. I think maybe we need to have another meeting and maybe the board
Sure.
get together. My number one observation about the whole process is I see the administration leaking into the goal-setting function of the board. In the old days, the board met by itself.
Yes, sir.
We came up with the goals. We came back with y'all. Y'all said it shouldn't be worded like that. Maybe this one is the same as that one, whatever, you know. And also, I see us leaking away from that. And one of these pages says we can either set the goals or we can respond to y'all's recommendations for what the goals ought to be. And at this point, not having had a chance to digest this information, I'm uncomfortable.
No, the decision does not need to be made today, but if we are going to change, that's a decision you guys need to make. Does that make sense? So the decision does not need to be made today. As a school district, we're moving forward with planning as if it will not change. So we've not stopped the planning because those goals were already approved by you guys. So the district is moving forward with the planning, and then if you guys determine that a change is warranted or even wanted or needed, we would then fit in where you've set the goals.
The assistance and the information y'all are providing to us, I think, is fantastic. You know, I'm just a little old school, you know. So.
Yes, sir, absolutely. And please keep in mind that the objectives and the data we're providing would be determined by you. So then you would set, so rather than us writing separate, so each key performance indicator determined by you would be an objective for us, if that makes, so that then that would become part of our district improvement plan, and it would be what we would we're writing our action plans on throughout the school year. So if, for an example, if you say we want teacher retention rate to be a key performance indicator, we would then write that as one of our objectives in our district improvement plan and measure the data throughout the year for you guys and report it back to you on the dashboard. And then at the end of the year, you can look at it and say, that number's not high enough, or that number's too high. Can we make it an actionable item for improvement in the future? Okay.
Thank you, thank you.
Absolutely. Okay.
Ms. Moore, are we currently using dashboards like this?
We are only using them in the accountability department to report back to our campuses, because so that they can see where the district averages are when we're determining, like we just completed district assessments. So we create a district dashboard so that when they see their campus results, they can compare them to the district results.
This is the way I view my data for my job every day.
Yes, sir. And it is the trend that people are going to the more of the dashboards so that it is immediate feedback and it's transparent. And so rather than just reporting to you on the objectives from the goals and the objectives, we're reporting the data back to you on multiple areas. It's accountability and transparency in more than just writing 5 or 6 SMART goals.
And it's very easy to access. I actually can view it on my smart device. So
you think this will work for us?
oh, I absolutely think it would work for us.
How often is the data going to be updated?
The data would depend on the key performance indicator. Some key performance indicators would only be able to be updated annually, like our accountability, our state test results, but other indicators could be updated weekly, monthly, or quarterly, or at least by semester. And it really would be dependent on what the key performance indicator is and how we build the measure to measure it.
So the current goals at this point, we're not measuring them, or?
Oh, yeah.
They are measured, yes, sir, but there's not a SMART goal set to it. So that while they're measured, there's no long-term target to hit with that.
So can we, if we decide to keep the same goals, can we implement that to that?
Absolutely, yes, sir. That would be path 2, that we keep the current goals, the current objectives, but we set long-term measurable targets for those goals and objectives. Yes, sir, absolutely.
We see a whole lot of that, Herbert, when we're getting ready to grade our superintendent. That data flows by us there in a very well organized and complete format. So.
Yes, and the only difference between what you're seeing now is that you guys would be setting a target for us to hit with our measurements.
So in order for us to see dashboards, we have to go to a completely different goals?
No.
We can't use the same goals and just have you guys report it back to us in dashboards?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. We can certainly create a dashboard for what we have now, and that is probably the easiest route, is just to set a dashboard for what we have now. Some of our objectives are not measured. While they're measurable, there's no vehicle to measure it with that. We would have to build the measurement for it because some of the objectives are not very specific in their data, if that makes sense. And so we would have to build the measure, but most of these measures would be built anyway.
So we would have to identify like time or percentage of growth?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So I noticed that, when they're reporting on the news, they always say, refer to the dashboard of that district. And I think this was more like for the COVID numbers.
Yes.
That word was always used, dashboards.
Mm-hmm.
And
Where the number of cases, the live cases, that is referred to as the dashboard, and they can go to our website and see the current numbers or the current measures. Yes, sir.
If we decided to do this, how long would it take for it to be up and running, and how much of a burden would it be on the staff to make this conversion in a short-term period?
The dashboard, it can be, once the key performance indicators or the objectives are identified, and as if there is, the measurement is already being taken, the dashboard can be created within days to weeks. The dashboard is a simple Excel spreadsheet with a chart. That piece is easy. Where we would take more time is if there's not a current measure that you guys would have to determine the measure that you actually want it within it. Like one of our goals is that we provide opportunities for students to participate extracurricular, co-curricular. Like what measure do you want to see? Do you want to see the current participation, or is there a measure you want us to hit? And that may take a little bit longer, but we could have it in place for the start of next school year very easily.
It's just
What are
harder
the-
if we do new goals, correct?
I'm sorry?
If we provide new goals, it's going to be a little harder for us to do that, right?
It takes longer.
It just takes longer, yes, sir.
What are the pros and cons of ours keeping the same goals and using the dashboards for a year or two, working our way into this system? Are there any pros?
The pros, it would be faster and easier because we've already have the direction that you've determined. So that would be a little more efficient because you already would have a basis of understanding of the system already. So the only thing new to you would be the reporting mechanism, and you would have a foundation already in the goals and the objectives. If we start changing and go toward the more of the pillar with the big ideas, then actually as a district, there's more accountability as the district because more is measured than if not. So there's pros and cons to each of them. Depends on what direction you want to go and what foundation you want to start with.
But we're talking about for next school year. We're not going to mess with the goals that we already have in place for this school year.
No, we can build it directly. You guys have already approved the goals, and that's what the planning for the district has already started for next year based on what you've already approved. And so we can, if it's going to be a big shift, if it's going to be big, it would be built over next year. We just need to start some of the planning.
So it looks like we're morely maybe going to transition just to maybe to the dashboard and
Yeah, I don't think.
I think our goals are probably.
I don't think we
I
should
mean,
reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, I think our goals are.
We already have good
Our
goals.
goals are good. I think we just transition the way we get our data, maybe.
Dashboard approach.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
where we're recording where
A
it's
little more
obtained,
transparent for everybody.
where we're at,
And
and
much
you know.
easier to view and read and understand.
Sure.
Is typically what we get when we
Wanda?
get dashboards.
Go ahead, you were about to.
I just assumed that the dashboard is going to be placed not just with the school district, but if you go into the email, if you go into the district's email, it shows up at the top, and it is set up like a dashboard. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
That's what I thought. It's just a simple form that is easy to do because everybody wants to the dashboard anyway.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. You are correct. You are correct.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'll add something. So you guys know that when you become a new superintendent, you have to do 36 hours of superintendent training. And of course, my first year was COVID and it wasn't offered, you know. So I had to get it all in this year. So I did, and you know, Mr. McGowan over there helped me, and I went to some trainings. Well, one of the trainings was about this process, and they had an experienced superintendent up there, and he was talking about how he had just transitioned his district from the old goal style to this. So I just saw this about 3 months ago, and it's happening all over the state of Texas.
Yeah.
This is the new format, and what he explained to us is that a lot of times when people call in and they're frustrated about the way something's going, it's very difficult to explain the entire picture to them in just a few minutes. But he says what he can do is he says, now ma'am, if you'll go back and look at our dashboard and you'll go into such and such goal, you'll see that we have struggled in that area. And that's why we've implemented this new tutorial plan. We're asking your child to stay an extra hour in the afternoon. You'll see as a district, we've been struggling there. And he said it's helped him. He said because his clientele, his community, believes they're being more transparent. It's just out there. This is it. So.
It provides like a visual representation so people can actually see
Yes.
it. And like you said, it does, from a community perspective, it does show more transparency. And anytime
Sure, sure.
And, yeah, in sales, we do this all the time.
Y'all use a dashboard?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Since
we have a dashboard.
15 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And it's really coming into the educational world now where just the data is very transparent. And so and we would just have to switch some of the things we measure because the measure is just in the amount of things we do versus a number that is attached to it. And so I can come back to you guys with the current goals, the current objectives, with what the measure would be on a dashboard. Okay?
It works for me.
Does that sound like the direction we're going in for now?
Yep.
All right, great. Okay, any other questions?
Nope.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
If I didn't get too involved in your thing, but
Oh, no, that's what. This was originally on the agenda, I think, in February. So we're trying to get a lot of it done quickly, so.
thank you, Mrs. Moore. Are we ready to go to Robbie?
We are. He's here.
I will now turn the floor over to Dr. Robbie McGowan, Deputy Executive Director, Division of Support Services with Region 4, who will facilitate the Board of Trustees Team of 8 training. I need something. I haven't eaten anything already. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
How are y'all doing?
Blessed.
Good. Hello, Ms. Johnson. Good to hear you. I'm doing well, thank you. I'm doing well. I'm going to pass around. There are 2 sign-in sheets because you're getting 2 for 1 today for this training. You're getting both your annual team building credit, but you're also getting the evaluating and improving student outcome. Some of you may know that as Senate Bill 1566 training. And so I'm going to pass around if you'll just initial out to the left of your name, and then Dr. Moore, will you initial for Ms. Johnson when it comes around to you
I
too?
got it.
So I'll start down here, and then we can just pass it around. So just initial on both versions and just pass that around. I have a handout.
So where do I initial?
Out to the left of your name. Yeah, just out to the left of your name. Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. They've already, this side's already got it. So just them and then also Dr. Moore. And then I understand there are 4 of you that will also spend just a few minutes with me afterwards, getting a whirlwind legislative update. So some of you are getting 3 for 1. Very good. Well, I want to start off, I try to start off each of my opportunities to work with boards with a word of gratitude. So I just want to thank you for your service as trustees. I believe it's probably one of the purest forms of servant leadership, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to work with you and to serve you this afternoon. I also want to say, you know, it was somewhat coincidental when we scheduled this, when Dr. Moore and I visited and we scheduled, and we said, well, we'll just do this at the same time that Terry was going to be doing the strategic planning, but this worked out perfectly. My only complaint is I would have liked to have gone before Terry because she stole most of my thunder, which she probably did a better job than I would have done anyway. But so I think what you'll find in our conversation this afternoon on evaluating and improving student outcomes is that you you as a board and as a leadership team, including Dr. Moore, you're already doing a lot of these things. I mean, literally, some of the things that you just heard and you just discussed are exact examples of what TEA, when TEA developed this training, of what TEA intended for districts to be doing. So I say that to say that you are ahead of the curve. I know Dr. Moore mentioned that there are other districts that are doing some of these dashboards, but there's some districts that haven't quite gotten there yet either. So the fact that you're having these discussions, that you're spending time talking about strategic planning and what it is you most desire for your students is an exemplar. And so I want to credit you and affirm you for that. Having said that, you have a copy, the handout that you have is a copy of the slides that were created by TEA. I'm a firm believer that most people who are public servants are quite capable of reading a lot of this information on their own. So it is not my intention this afternoon to have what I refer to sometimes as death by PowerPoint. Have y'all we've all been to one of those trainings where basically the person reads the slides to you and you think, well, I could have done that myself. I really want us to spend a little bit of time this afternoon I want to really hear from you in what do you believe are some examples of some things you're doing right here in Galena Park where you're already addressing this issue of evaluating and improving student outcomes. I do want to start real quick. I kind of know I got everyone's names and had an opportunity to say hello when I came in. So here's what I'd like to do. I would like to just answer the last two questions here on our introduction this afternoon. First of all, what is your one bragging point about Galena Park ISD? And it's okay if 2 or 3 of you share the same bragging point. It's okay if we have repeats. But I want you to think about one. If I said, tell me one good thing going on in Galena Park ISD, what would that be? And if you weren't here today, this afternoon, where would you be? What would you be doing? Okay? So what's one bragging point about Galena Park ISD? And if you weren't here at this board training, what would you be doing? And I want to hear from all 8 of you. So Dr. Moore, that includes you too. You're going to have to answer these questions. So who would like to volunteer first?
I'll go first.
Okay, thank you.
So I would like to brag about teamwork. I see a lot of teamwork, not only on the board, but also within the district itself, within the schools, principals, teachers, and staff.
Okay.
And if I wasn't here tonight, I'll probably be working at home, doing some things in the backyard.
Excellent. Okay. So you'd be working somehow or another, right? But teamwork is your bragging point. Lots of examples of teamwork. Great. That's going to come up in just a second. So thank you. Who would like to go next?
I think we can just go down.
Okay, we'll go around the corner.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead, Wanda.
Go ahead, Ms. Johnson.
Oh, okay, I like the fact that Galena Park offers so many opportunities for our students, from sports to extra college credit, to cake, to culinary, etc. And I like that opportunity.
Excellent. And what would you be doing this afternoon if you weren't on the line with us?
She's driving,
What would you be doing if you weren't attending this board training this afternoon?
driving back.
Don't be embarrassed, go ahead and tell us.
Be at the casino?
You mean as far as the kids, or what would I be doing besides that?
Yeah, just is she driving? Or
Yes.
Oh, you're on the road. Okay, so you're multitasking. I did not realize you were driving. Okay, well then that answers that question. All right, thank you so much, Mr. Sparks.
Miss Johnson kind of stole my thunder on the bragging point, and that's just the opportunities that we provide for all of our students, both academically and extracurricular. I think it's a huge highlight at GPISD, and I'm really proud of that. And if I weren't here tonight, I'd be watching my grandson because he's actually waiting for me to get home. So he's gonna spend the night with us tonight, so I'm
Well,
looking
maybe I'll see
forward to
about,
that.
see what we can do about getting you out of here at not too late of a time to do that. That's important work. Thank you so much. Mr. Miller?
I appreciate the fact how important safety is.
Okay.
Safety to the students, the employees, and visitors.
Right.
That is absolutely a top priority. And we can do all the other things, but we need to be safe first.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you. What would you be doing if you weren't here this evening?
I'd be home watching Ancient Aliens on the History Channel.
Ancient Aliens. I'll have to check that one out. I haven't seen that one.
It's
Is
pretty
it good?
good. Oh, yeah.
Is it? Okay. Okay. I usually, when I ask that question of boards, I sometimes get ideas of like good TV shows, because every once in a while I get one or two people that tell me about a show. Thank you. Dr. Moore?
The thing I like most about, or I'm most proud of in Galena Park I.S.D. is we're a family. And that kind of covers the whole gamut of, we offer a lot because in our hearts we know it's the right thing to do. We have great teamwork because in our heart we know it's the right thing to do. And with family, we sometimes call each other out because in our heart we know it's the right thing to do. And a school district this size, to have that created over time is something really, really special. And if you look at the years of experience of our leadership team, and our board members, and everybody, it's been a lot of hard work over a lot of years to have what we have. And you know, we have to be careful not to take that for granted.
Great point. Great point.
That's what I'm most proud of. And if I wasn't here, I would be either at a Galena Park I.S.D. game, or, you know, I have a grandson that plays t-ball, so we're t-balling, and I don't believe he has a game tonight, so I'd probably be one of our softball or baseball games.
Okay. I don't feel quite as guilty then, since I'm not interrupting the grandson t-ball game. All right, thank you. Thank you. Stevens?
I am most proud of the commitment that our administration, our staff, our teachers have to the students. I'm always blown away with some of the performances that come in here, and you can really see the passion behind and all of the presentations that we get behind what they are doing, and they are committed to the students. If I wasn't here tonight, I would be wrestling with a 6-year-old.
Is that part of your wellness plan, wrestling with the 6-year-old?
Yeah, keep me in
Okay.
shape.
I bet you. I bet you. All right. Well, thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Yes, sir.
Well, I guess I'm going to say, because nobody said it, I guess we're going to brag on our athletics.
Okay.
We have good teams everywhere, a couple state championships. You know, not just football. You know, we won it before in basketball.
Track.
Track. So I guess that, to go along with academics, that we've got a lot of lower income kids that are really doing really, really good and making a difference for their families. And I think that's a big, because, you know, I think, you know, for the most part, 70-80% of our kids are economically challenged. So, I mean, that's a big plus when we can compete with, you know, with the more affluent schools. That's something I like to brag about. And if I wasn't here, I'd be probably like with Noe too, because I've got 2 small grandkids that I haven't seen in 3 weeks because I've been gone for 2 and sick for 1. So I'd be definitely, I'd be there, but I'll be there tomorrow morning. I already told them.
Good. Good. Well, thanks for being here. Yes, ma'am.
For me, what I brag about, I guess, the most is the successes of our students. You know, you go somewhere and you see someone and they're doing something fantastic, and then you immediately say, oh, that person's from North Shore, or
Right.
that person came from Galena Park. And I love how our kids are out there. They're out there and they're doing great. And I love how our graduation rate has gone up. I love how our scores are going up, and yeah, we can brag.
Right.
Now, what I'd be doing if I wasn't here, yeah, I'd probably be babysitting. And I would probably be cooking dinner for my grandchildren.
Yeah. So they're fending without you. Yeah, okay. Well, thank you.
McDonald's it is.
Good. Well, Well, thank you all for being here. And I seriously, I mean, when I say thank you for being here tonight, you may be saying, well, I didn't have a choice, but you actually did have a choice. I mean, you had a choice, and you made a choice as a committed part of this team, or as Dr. Moore said, I like the way he said it, as a committed part of this family, you made the decision to be here this evening. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful for that, and I want to be mindful of your time as well. So there are going to be some of the slides that I'm going to skip over because I think they're things you can read on your own. However, my time is your time. So if I go too fast and you have a question for me, I certainly want you to feel free to ask that question. This slide, the only thing I want to point out about this slide just shows all the board training requirements that you have over the year. The one thing I'll point out is there's that big white arrow between team building and this evaluating and improving student outcomes. We just show that to show you that you're getting credit for both of those tonight. That doesn't mean I'm keeping you for that amount of time. That means you're getting that amount of time of credit tonight. So the premise behind this training, the reason it's required of board members every other year, is actually in the education code. So there's your statutory. For those of you who want to the rule followers who want to make sure you meet the letter of the law, that's the letter of the law that this training requirement comes from. And this training developed by TEA is really divided into three parts. The first is discussing what behaviors do school boards take on that's correlated with improved student outcomes. And I want to stop right here and say something. And this is an editorial of mine. This doesn't come from TEA. TEA developed these slides, but I'm the trainer tonight, so you're stuck with my opinions about things and not TEA's, because y'all remember I work for the education agency. I mean, for the Education Service Center, not the education agency, right? So, and I've said this publicly, so I'm not speaking out of turn. But when we talk about student outcomes, you define student outcomes. Now, yes, we're going to talk a little bit, if you notice the second bullet, we're going to talk about the state accountability system. And that's based upon the outcomes that the state has determined. But it's this body that determines what student outcomes are most critical for your community. And so I want to emphasize that. I'm a firm believer. I'm a firm believer in the I of I.S.D., which is independent. And I know it's hard because a lot of times we feel, especially some of you who've been a part of this for a lot of years, we sometimes feel less and less independent from what some state requirements are. But you reflect the values of the community, and I heard that in your highlights tonight. Not one of you said, I'm proud of our students' STAR scores. That doesn't mean that I don't think you think it's important. I'm sure it is. In fact, I'm guessing it's going to be an indicator on that dashboard that you were discussing. But not one of you said that. And so what that tells me is maybe that's important to you, but I hear that there are other things that are important to you too. In fact, some of you specifically said, we like the fact that we have so many different opportunities for students. So I just want to get that out on the table, because if I were to just strictly go by what's written on these slides here, this would seem like it was just a training about STAR. And I just want you to know that I don't subscribe to that theory. We'll touch base very quickly on the state accountability system. I think as a board, I've just been listening to your conversation earlier with Terry. I think you're very knowledgeable about that, so we'll touch base on that. And then we'll talk a little bit about, interestingly, Terry actually already did the third bullet, talking about progress monitoring. That's what you were already discussing at the very beginning, so we probably won't spend a lot of time on that. But this is really all about the fact that what boards do matter. Adult behavior change matters, and it leads to student performance change. So the board, I think a lot of times I'll say we, as the general body of people who do school board training, I think sometimes we can be guilty of telling boards that, oh, now your job's to pass the budget and pass the policy and leave the educating to the educators. But you have a role. You actually impact what happens in the classroom. And so that's kind of what this slide boils down to. And this slide, and I'm going to spend most of our time with this, and this is where I'm going to want to hear from y'all. This is a pictorial that depicts, and this is research-based. This isn't just someone's opinion that thought, oh, okay, we think this will look nice. Let's put it on a slide and show it in a board training. The research, people have done research on high-performing school organizations and their boards. And they looked at what is it that the boards are doing in these districts. And I'm not talking about just school districts that are high-performing because all of their students that they have are born on third base, basically, that they're affluent and you know, these are all kinds of school districts, actually from all over the country. And these are the common behaviors that, oh, thank you so much. These are the common behaviors that boards exhibit that are correlated with improved student outcomes. So if you'll notice on the very far left at the very beginning, it all starts with unity. Board and superintendent working collaboratively together. I liked what Dr. Moore said earlier about a family. You know, a family is, you know, getting along and working together and kind of taking up for each other. And being a family is sometimes we don't always agree on every single detail, but what we do is once we've kind of said our piece, we act on behalf of the greater good, right? I think a lot of times I use, and I don't know, I sometimes get funny looks when I use this analogy, but I really think about, we call this a team of 8 training, but it's really a team of 2. It's the board, because you are a body corporate, and it's the superintendent. So I think a lot of times you think about parents, right? And parents don't, I mean, I think about my wife and I and our 4 sons. We didn't necessarily always agree with every detail about decisions we had to make about the boys, but we worked those out, and then we worked together as we raised the boys. And so that's that superintendent and board working collaboratively. I want to go through each of these and explain each one of them, and then I'm going to ask you to give me an example when you've seen these things happening with this board, with this group of 8. Okay, so the first is that unity piece. Then we go inside the box. That's the structure part. And the first there with the little telescope is the vision, setting student outcome goals. Boards, believe it or not, there are boards that have not even had the same kind of conversations that you just had earlier this afternoon. Now, it is required, because of House Bill 3 a couple of years ago, districts are required now to have certain student outcome goals, and Terry mentioned those earlier, the early literacy, early math, and the college career military readiness. But prior to that requirement, there were some districts that really didn't have student outcome goals. So establishing that's a behavior that's linked to improved student outcomes. The next is identifying non-negotiables. What are the other things, in addition to student outcomes, what are the things that your community values? So in other words, we are going to make sure that we focus on these non-negotiables. Now, so Mr. Miller, I'm gonna use one of your examples. You talked about the highlight, you talked about safety. And safety is a pretty broad topic. I mean, there's physical safety, there's safety of students, safety of staff, social emotional learning, lots of things. I get the impression that is considered a non-negotiable. I would guess that this board, and I see heads nodding, this board believes that we want to have a safe environment for the children and the educators in Galena Park I.S.D. That's an example of a non-negotiable. So in other words, yes, we want to focus on the outcomes. Man, we want students to be career ready and college ready, and we want them to have opportunities in fine arts and athletics and robotics and you know, all of those other areas. However, we're not going to sacrifice safety for doing that. Another non-negotiable I hear from boards is we want to be good stewards of the taxpayer dollars. We want to do this in a way that now that doesn't mean we're going to hoard all the money and never spend anything. It means we're going to spend it like it was our own, and we're going to spend it in a way that has the most impact for students. So that's another example of a non-negotiable. And then monitoring progress, and that's that part I was so pleased to hear. In fact, I should have been videoing that part, and I could, next time I go work with a board, I can say, hey, I want you to listen to this board talking about dashboard, because I got to tell you, I'm a little bit of a governance nerd when it comes to this stuff, so I get excited about it. And to listen to a board talk about a performance dashboard was cool, I thought. So now my 20-something-year-old sons would probably think that's not cool at all, but I thought it was pretty cool. So that's that part about you don't just set the goals, but you want to come back and say, okay, how are we doing? Are we making progress towards those goals? We want to hear from your educational experts to know, are we making some progress towards what we said we wanted to achieve? So if you do all of those things, what you'll see is those are all those behaviors, and I think those are already all happening, that are gonna result in improved student outcomes. So now I want to be quiet, and I want to hear from you. Let's start first with unity. Tell me just some practical examples. How does it, if I came and just observed the board and the superintendent working together, what's some evidence I would see that y'all act in unity?
I think there's several opportunities that we can discuss, or examples that we can discuss where unity is present. I think every time we go in the back to discuss the hard issues, we are respectful. We may not always agree, but we respect the differences, and we come out as a united front. I wish the public could see that, us working through, because sometimes it just looks like we're a united front, we think and move as one. But, I mean, anytime we have, superintendent evaluations, that's an opportunity for us to unify, discuss, and make decisions on employment. There's several.
Okay. I love what you said about I wish the public could see that, because that's where a lot of the work happens. And if all they see is at the dais, right, it's like, wow, that looks pretty easy. Another thing I've talked with new board members about is, someone may just come to a board meeting and they see what happens at the dais, and they don't know all the reading and the research that you've done ahead of time to be prepared to vote on those items. So anyway, that's a great example. Who would like to offer another example of unity?
If I call Dr. Moore and say, what are the demographics of Galena Park Middle School? He shares the question and the answer with everybody on the board automatically.
Okay.
That's a given. That's
a great practice, yeah. Because if you are curious about it, then others may be curious about it as well, right? And so, yeah, that's a great example. It's a great practice. I think we share that. I try to, one of the other hats I wear is to facilitate our Aspiring Superintendent Academy. And I like to hear that. That's good advice for aspiring superintendents to know that too. So.
I have an example.
Okay.
So I'm, as a superintendent, particularly in the last couple of years under COVID, the information was changing really fast. And I was trying to keep these guys informed, and we developed a text strand to where I could inform them. And, they can't respond back. because it creates a problem if they respond
Oh,
back.
yeah.
And lots of times I'm sending out information that's really controversial, and I really appreciate them policing each other and me and ourselves, and nobody gets their feelings hurt. I mean, you know, everybody, we work through it, people read it, you know, somebody sends a question, somebody else will say, oh, we can't ask that question, no answer, nobody comment, because we're all looking out for each other. And, you know, we all have different things going on in our lives, and I may send it out at a real tough moment for any one of them in their own family or at their business. So they have helped make it much easier for me to communicate because everybody follows the rules.
That's important.
I mean, it's really important for me, from my standpoint.
And the key there I heard was everybody.
Everybody.
Because on that unity part, it just takes one.
Sure.
And it can throw the chemistry of the entire group. And so that's a great example. Anybody else want to offer a unity example before we move to the others?
Yes, I would like to mention one.
Okay.
I know that when we go to any of our trainings, whether it's the I.S.D or NSDA, or there's any leadership training, giving an example like at the National School Board Convention we just had in San Diego, I love the fact that the board members who were able to go, we work in unity. They asked, you know, we talked about what sessions we went to. We were able to share, and we were like really a family. And I do appreciate that because we could share different things and we got along quite well. We always go to the same sessions, but we were able to come out and talk about some of the things that we've done in each session. So I like the fact that when we're in training, it seems more like a family, and I appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Ms. Johnson. As a board trainer, that warms my heart to hear you say that y'all are also discussing the training that you're going to as well. So thank y'all. So how about vision? Setting student outcome goals. Let's talk about that a little bit. So you have student goals in the part that Terry went over earlier. You have a goal with, you call them objectives, so it doesn't really matter what you call them, but you have that. What was the board's role in that?
We've set and established those goals.
Okay, right. So who owns those goals? Who ultimately owns the student outcome goals? The goals. In other words, who's ultimately responsible for saying these are the areas, and I'm not talking about the detail, the numbers, like from this percentage to this percentage, but I'm saying who ultimately is responsible for saying we believe that post-secondary success is important for the students of Galena Park I.S.D.
We are.
We are.
It's the board. It is the board. So I want to go back. I can't remember who asked it earlier. Believe it or not, I promise y'all I was listening earlier. But one of you asked, maybe Mr. Miller. I can't know if it was you or not. But one of you asked about, well, isn't it the board's responsibility to establish or to come up with the goals? And what the research shows is, ideally, the situation is, yes, the board does adopt the goals, working collaboratively with the superintendent. What I see that looking like with boards, with high-functioning boards, is the board is able, in reflecting those values of the community, the board says, you know what, post-secondary success is important to our community. Having opportunities, you know, co-curricular and extracurricular opportunities are important to our community. Career development, so it's not just about college, but having career development opportunities is important. Early childhood literacy, knowing that literacy is really the gatekeeper for all of academic success, that's important. So the board, you know, provides that general guidance, and then the administration says, okay, we hear you. You say these areas are important. We're gonna bring you the detail to say, okay, let's take early childhood literacy. Here's where we currently are. Here's where we believe we could be in 5 years. And oh, by the way, in year 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, we kind of think these are going to be what the annual targets would be. And not only that, this is where we think this is where our economically disadvantaged students are. This is where our Hispanic students are. This is where our African American students are. This is where our emergent bilingual students are. And then you as the board adopt those goals with the detail that's provided by your educational experts. So the answer to the question is, who develops the goals? It's really both. But in the situation, what you don't want is you don't want the superintendent may come and say, okay, I've developed the goals, and they may have developed all these goals, and maybe there's not a goal about, I think I heard y'all mention something about staff retention, right? Recruitment and retention. So
Qualified
yeah,
teachers.
I don't think Dr. Moore would ever do this. I know him and don't think he would do this, but what if you did? What if you had a superintendent that just didn't think that was important? So if the superintendent just brought the goals to you without first listening to you about what areas you think are important, you may end up with missing some goals that you want to have. So, but it works the opposite too. If the board just comes up with the goals, then the board, you don't have all the detailed information that you need to set like those annual targets. Or, how do we know if we're closing the gap between our economically disadvantaged students and our non-economically disadvantaged students? So the answer is, I know this sounds like kind of this may sound like I'm avoiding making an answer, but I think the answer is it's both. It's really the board and the superintendent. Any thoughts about that process?
I agree.
So do y'all have, I feel like, I know I asked the question, give me an example. I think the first 30 minutes or so you spent at this meeting today was a great example of this vision when you're talking about your goals. And we'll get down to the third one. I think it was a great example of accountability too, of monitoring progress. And then we already gave one example about values. We gave the example that Mr. Miller had mentioned about safety. What are some other non-negotiables that you as a board feel like that in our community, no matter what we do for student success, we either want to make sure this happens or we want to make sure this doesn't happen? What are some of those non-negotiables?
I've got one, Robert.
Okay.
This is something that has changed in my lifetime, but that I.S.D. is not only about getting kids ready to go to college. We have a much broader responsibility, and we have really stepped it up to see to it, that the kids that aren't interested in going to college or shouldn't go to college, they're ready to do something with their life when they get out of school.
Gotcha. So yeah, that's a great example. So this community values post-secondary success that's measured in ways other than just college. Yeah, that's an important value. We value lots of forms of post-secondary success. Great.
Another one is nutrition, I think.
Okay.
That's something that, because of, the makeup of our district and that, we have a lot of students that are economically disadvantaged, nutrition is extremely important. And it's one of the things that I'm really proud of with our district. We make a huge effort to make sure that we feed all of our kids every day. And even during the summers, we're implementing programs that do that. So I think that's another one that for me is non-negotiable.
Gotcha.
We need to feed our students.
Yeah, that's an important part. In some ways too, I appreciate Mr. Esparza, that is, I could see where that could be considered part of safety, right? Of providing a safe environment is the nourishment or part of wellness when we think about wellness.
Sure. The word we use is safe and healthy.
Safe and healthy, yeah, exactly.
That's the way we say it,
Yeah.
which covers all
Yeah,
that.
that's great. That's great. Any other examples of non-negotiables?
I can give you, I can
Okay.
help them. There's a lot.
Yeah.
So, and and they do a lot for us, so I'll help them out. But another non-negotiable is our cleanliness. You know, since the pandemic has started, there's a whole new standard placed on that, and there's a whole new measure of what that is and how often things are clean and what we consider clean, and that's back to the health and safe goal. It's all under that goal to make sure everybody's well taken care of.
Okay, that's great. That's a great example.
Our facilities,
Our facilities, okay?
our facilities are,
Yeah,
some might be old, but they're still in really good shape.
Gotcha.
You would not tell, because I've gone to some other districts and I've seen some of the schools and I'm like, whoa,
right.
you know, not too far from here, so,
Well, and it speaks to, yeah, I mean, people see that, right? That's a message you send your community. People drive by your schools. Think about the amount of people that live in this community that may not have a reason to go on a campus, but they drive by and they're looking at stuff like that. Yeah. I won't say what district it is. It's not this one. But I drive, and it's not the district where I live, but I drive through a district going to see our oldest and his, well, we mainly go now more often because they're now fostering a little 3-year-old girl, so we're having our first taste of grandparenting. So you grandparents that you mentioned earlier, I could relate now, but there's one campus I drive by and I think about that because the grounds just don't look well kept, and and I just think, that's sending a message. That's sending a message. And then that monitoring progress. That monitoring progress is really about, how do we know we're making progress? And so that dashboard idea and concept is a great way of saying, of not only you doing it as a board, but reflecting to the community that these things are important. Because your community, and when I talk about your community, I'm including the staff. Your community watches you as an example. And so if your community, including the staff, says, wow, our district, our board has determined that our district is going to adopt this method of monitoring our key performance indicators, and not only that, it's going to be transparent, it's going to be public, then that means those things they're asking me, that the administration's asking me to do in my classroom, the board really thinks is important. And so it's a way for you to show your priorities to the community and to the staff. So again, y'all could do an infomercial for examples of this slide and the behaviors that improve student outcomes. We're not going to spend a lot. These definitions, these are just definitions of things in a system. I will give y'all, some of y'all have heard me give this analogy before, so I'm just going to give it real quickly. The board is really responsible mostly for outcomes. So the analogy I use a lot of times is a professional sports team. So let's say we're in basketball season, professional basketball team. So the outcome for a professional basketball team is to win, right? They want to win. No professional basketball team says we want to lose, even though our local one has done a lot of that this year, but they don't want to, right? That's not their desired outcome. And who is it that ultimately sets the expectation for the outcome for let's say, a professional basketball team? Who sets that expectation? Who ultimately is responsible?
The owner.
The team owner.
The team
really?
owner.
Yeah, the team
The owner.
owner. Yeah, the team owner. And you said the community, because the team owner needs to do that, because if he doesn't set the expectations, the community may become totally disinterested. Stop buying tickets, stop coming to games, those kind of things. So yeah, the owner actually, in representing the community, it's the owner. And then the inputs in a basketball team are things like the players and the game plan and the practice schedule and the assistant coaches and all of those things. Who makes the decisions about those things? Who makes the decisions about which players play, what the game plan is going to be, who the assistant coaches are going to be?
The coach.
The coach. So if I'm using that as an analogy for a school district, who's the team owner of Galena Park I.S.D.?
the board.
The board. And then who's the coach? The superintendent.
Superintendent.
Yeah. So that board, just like we just discussed a few minutes ago, you set the expectation for what are our outcomes, goals, going to be. And then you communicate that to your coach, the superintendent, and then you expect that superintendent to make those day-to-day input decisions that will result in you meeting those outcomes. And so, and I can't remember who said it earlier. I should have been taking notes. Adrian, it may have been you. Someone mentioned the superintendent evaluation earlier in y'all's conversation with Terry. That's exactly right. Because especially if you're using that kind of data in a systemic way with the superintendent evaluation doesn't turn into, well, I don't like the color of the tie he's wearing tonight, or I don't like the fact, I took count and he went to, 3 more Galena Park high school basketball games than he did North Shore, those kind of things. You actually use the data in that place. So I was really encouraged to hear that as well. But that's the reason this slide is there. And I'm gonna skip. So we talked about student outcome goals earlier. I was really glad to hear Terry talk about kind of SMART goals too, because that helps you create goals that are more measurable. So it sounds like that's something y'all are going to be working towards. You're going to use the goals you currently have now, go ahead and start developing that dashboard, and then possibly add some more specificity, some more detail to those goals as you go. So again, you guys could write the book on this training. Terry did mention earlier the goals that are required by state law. Y'all list those as objectives under your student performance goals. So just so you know, she was speaking the truth. I know y'all know she was, but these are exactly, this is the statute in the Education Code, section 11, 185 and 186, that requires y'all to have an early childhood literacy objective, an early childhood math objective, and a college career military readiness objective. So, are y'all okay with continuing to go forward, and then if you just need to take care of your needs, you can get up and go on your own, or do y'all want to take a formal break?
No.
Keep
Pleasure
going.
of the board.
I already know they will roll.
And I'm fine with that too. So please take care of your needs. So whatever you need to do. So I mentioned earlier that one of the other things required in this training is the accountability system. But before we do that, I want to ask y'all a question, and I want you to think. Now listen carefully to this question. I want you to think about an area of your life outside of your service on this board or as a superintendent. So not as a board member or superintendent. Where do you experience accountability? So in other words, what are you accountable for, or to whom are you accountable? So that's the first part of the question. The second part is, what benefit do you get out of that accountability? And I'll just open the floor. Where's an area in your life outside of being on the board where you're accountable for something or to someone, and what benefit do you get from that accountability?
Your credit score.
Oh, I'm sorry? Credit score?
Your credit score.
Okay, so financial account, and what benefit do you get out of that?
Better rates.
Better rates, exactly. So you take care of paying your bills, paying them on time. No, I think you had.
I was just going to say that, every day we go to work, and so we're accountable for, something at work. For me,
Right.
it's a area that, encompasses about $105 million worth of sales.
Wow.
So it's a huge number, and I'm held accountable for making sure that we hit those numbers on a yearly basis.
And what benefit do you get from that
I get a
accountability?
paycheck.
Right, you get a paycheck. You can support yourself and your
Right.
family. Do you have people that you're accountable, people that work for you
I do.
that you're accountable to?
I do.
And what benefit do you get out of your accountability to your employees?
Well, one is, we work as a team, and for me, it's being able to help them grow, not just as individual, but in their job, in their daily lives.
Right.
But the benefit is that, as we have goals that are not just individual based, but they're broad company based goals.
Right.
So, that the fact that we can work together to achieve some of those broader goals only benefits the entire team.
Yeah, so you have that teamwork, plus you retain those employees and those kind of things. Thank you. Who else would like to share an area or they're accountable?
Family? You're accountable to your family.
Family, yeah, accountable for kind of the support, and
For
what
the
benefit do you get
support,
out of
for the,
that?
Happiness.
Yeah, happiness, you get that whole fellowship with your family, right? Yeah, so, let me ask you this, why would anybody have an idea, if the requirement of this training is to talk about the state accountability system, why would I ask this question? I'll give you a little hint here. How many of you are just huge fans of the state accountability system? That you would like hang up a banner at your house that says, I love the state accountability system? Yeah, I don't ever get any yeses when I ask that question. So just so you know, y'all aren't an outlier. But you're not against accountability, right? Right. Accountability is a good thing. Good things come from accountability. I've heard you talk about your accountability to the children and the staff in your schools. So if we just jump off in a conversation about the A through F accountability system, I see people, they just kind of, they either shut down because they're like, nope, I don't want to hear about that, or I hear all the reasons of why the accountability system needs to be changed. And I will tell you, I'm not saying I disagree with those, but unfortunately, none of us in this room can change that directly. So I don't know that that's a good use of our time. I just, if anything else, I would say to board members is that, there are good things about accountability, and there are good ways to implement accountability even on a local level. Now, we're all responsible for the state accountability system. We can't escape it. But it doesn't mean it's the only thing that you as a board believe that you are held accountable for. I heard you earlier talking about, even your things about your conversations about your safe and healthy schools. The state doesn't hold you accountable for those things, but sure sounds like it's important to you. And I'm guessing you're holding yourselves accountable, and you're holding the administration accountable for it.
Family holds.
Yeah, family holds each other accountable.
That's the difference.
Yep, that's a great point. Great point. So, the next several slides talk about the accountability system. I am going to flip through these really quickly. So if there's a burning question you have about the accountability system, please let me know. Just so you know for sure, the accountability system is based on the TEKS, the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, which is tested on the STAR, which feed into the accountability rating. Here's an example of a STAR question. One thing I do always point out when I do this training, this is a STAR question right here. An actual STAR question. It's on your handout too, if you can see it on your handout easier. But an art teacher has 736 crayons. She threw away 197 broken crayons. Then she bought 150 more crayons. Which equation shows how to find the number of crayons the art teacher has now? This is one of the math TEKS. This is a one of the third grade math TEKS. Other than math, what does a child have to know how to do to be successful?
Read.
I don't know about y'all. Some of y'all are a little younger than me. It's been a while for me since I've been a third grader. But how many of you recall using the word equation as a regular vocabulary word when you were in the third grade?
Probably not.
No. Yeah, exactly.
No.
Right, exactly, Ms. Johnson. Yeah, so I'll get on my soapbox here a little bit. Every once in a while, I'll hear people who are kind of anti-public schools, and they talk about how we're watering things down for kids. I think kids have pretty high expectations. And when you look at what the reading levels are for third grade students, that I think we have some high expectations for students. I'll kind of leave it at that. So, okay, off my soapbox. Sorry about that. Thank y'all for indulging me. This just talks a little bit about what the STAR is designed for and what it's not designed for. It is designed to try to determine mastery of the TEKS. The example I use a lot with this is, if I had a tape measure, I could measure the length of this table, right? I can measure how tall I am with a tape measure. But could I measure how much I weigh with a tape measure? No. Doesn't mean a tape measure is a worthless measure. It just means I can't measure everything with a tape measure. So the same thing about the STAR. I'm not saying the STAR is necessarily a worthless measure, but I can't measure everything with STAR. There are a lot of things I heard you guys, you as a group say that are important to you for your children that can't be measured by STAR. I'm going to go through this. I just want the accountability rating is made up of 3 domains. You even saw that. I really like the way y'all had that on your dashboard that you showed, Dr. Moore. And so they're made up of 3 domains. You get your best score of the first 2 domains, and then that's 70%, and then closing the gaps, which also meets the federal accountability component, is the last 30% of accountability. So real quickly, I'll just tell you the first one, student achievement, is almost entirely made up of the STAR and made up of college, career, military readiness, and graduation rates. And then the second domain is actually made up of 2 things. It shows you, this graphic shows you it's made up of how students progress from one year to the next. So you get credit for, even if a student comes to you at a pretty low level, you get credit for the progress that you make with that student that year. It also takes into account, what this graphic shows you is it takes into account the percentage of economically disadvantaged students you have. So the higher the number of economically disadvantaged students, this grading system takes that into account. It's not that economically disadvantaged students can't achieve, they just need a lot more resources in order to support them to be able to do that. And then the last domain actually takes into account looking at individual student groups and saying, are these students progressing at the same rate or close to the same rate as the others? You know, based on race and ethnicity, based on special education status, economically disadvantaged, emergent bilingual students, so we're looking at, this is a list. I say this to board members anytime I get a chance to show this. Here's the good news about this slide. You as a board member don't need to memorize this or know all this data. You got some really, really hardworking people in your district that keep up with this. What I want you as a board member to do is next time, and I'm not sure who all it is that's responsible for the data and reports it to you, but you can have a little empathy for them because they look at all the different indicators. So for those 4 levels over there, those weighted components, they have to keep up with it for every single one of those student groups, but then they're also on multiple grade levels because every grade level where a student is tested, they have to keep up with that. So your folks who are tracking your data have a lot of moving parts that they're keeping up with. That's that kind of dashboard stuff that you'll be looking at. So there's your kind of the final picture of the accountability system. So we've talked about the first 2, and I just want to talk a little bit more about the state has asked us to just remind boards that part of monitoring student progress is looking at those student population groups. And a lot of times people lose track of, we're not talking about just small numbers of students. So if you look in the state of Texas, 20% of students in the state of Texas are emergent bilingual students. I don't know what the percentage is here in Galena Park, but if there are over 5 million students in the state of Texas. That means over 1 million of them are emergent bilingual students.
Well, that's right now, because pretty soon it's gonna be a lot more.
Right, it may be more.
You've seen the news
Yeah.
lately, I mean, it's gonna be a lot more.
Right, so that's, you know, as districts are monitoring their progress, they're having to monitor those, you know, you're not just looking at your overall student numbers, you're looking at these other student groups as well. Special education students, over 1 in 10 students are in special education. So that would be 500,000 students out of 5 million students in Texas. So just and some of these are just some, we won't look at all of these, but just to show you that, and these are statewide, this is not Galena Park data, this is statewide data, but, you know, there is some room for growth when we look at how our students with disabilities are performing compared to overall students. Part of that is, you know what, we need the resources. We need the resources and the time to work with those students. So anyway, yeah, those are those numbers.
And just to like touch on that, because I know we have a very good program around that. So I know we get kids that should be going to other districts that come here.
Which means that our special ed numbers are inflated.
Inflated because,
Inflated, which gives us a staffing issue.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And we need more staff, and it's 1-to-1. and so
Oh,
yeah, so so
Yeah.
that, we've always had that, I mean, that issue.
Yeah, you know, I guess the challenges of success
Yeah,
are that people are gonna seek you out, right? And staffing is a huge piece of this. I'm a little biased with that. My wife's an occupational therapist in the school district where we live. And yeah, you're right, Dr. Moore. I mean, you look at if you take a student, I'm sorry, Ms. Johnson, what were we gonna say? Oh, okay. If you look, you know, you take a student who is not receiving special education services, maybe who's not economically disadvantaged, who, you know, that you look at the staffing needs of that child compared to a special education student, and it's
not even close.
significantly different. Yeah. The last slide on here, these are just samples of what are the kind of questions. If we talk about progress monitoring, what are the kind of questions that board members should ask at those board meetings where we're getting student data? And so it's a lot of kind of who, what, and why. You know, a lot of being a board member and your role in monitoring student progress, because the superintendent and their staff are doing that day-to-day part of it. Your role a lot of times is what questions to ask. You know, questions like, hey, this is working at this campus. You look at that last column in the first bullet on that last column. How can we replicate? Hey, this great thing's happening at this campus. How can we replicate that over there? You know, or you know, why was there so much growth with this area last month or last quarter? And how could we continue to grow in that? So those are just some kind of helpful hints there. So we have covered all three components of evaluating and improving student outcomes. Was there something you were hoping you would learn this afternoon about this that I failed to cover or highlight?
This is very helpful.
Yeah, it helps. I appreciate that, Adrian. What I think it helps board members focus on these questions is it helps you focus on the outputs and the outcomes and not the inputs. You notice you don't see a question up there about, well, what instructional strategy was Miss Jones using in her third grade classroom? That's not, the board doesn't, luckily, that's actually good news for y'all. Y'all don't have to worry about those things. But what you want to know is, hey, I'm looking at this trend and I see that we have some success with this group of students and we're not seeing the same success rate with this group. How can we take what we learned with this group and apply it to this other one? Yeah.
And that's where a dashboard, where you're getting real time as opposed to the end of the year. Does that make sense? That's the reason you see the districts going to that dashboard approach. So you're getting some real-time benchmark scores and.
Well, you can identify trends pretty quickly.
Sure.
Right. Yeah, and one thing I didn't show this slide, but there's a slide that refers to districts sometimes create what's called a monitoring calendar. But when you have a dashboard, you don't really even have to do that, because what's important about the monitoring calendar, which you accomplish with the dashboard, is, in fact, one of y'all asked Terry this question when you said, well, how often is the data updated? And the answer is, well, it depends. Some data we get maybe monthly, some data we may only get a couple of times a year. And so having that dashboard helps you as a board kind of get into a rhythm to know, well, hey, this time of year, we're probably going to get an update on enrollment of students that are in career pathway, career pathways or certification pathways or things like that. So, and what that saves you is as a board member having to say, hey, could we get a report next month on the update on our enrollment in career pathways? Well, because the answer may be, well, the data hasn't changed since you got the report 2 months ago, because it only changes a couple of times a year. So that dashboard gives you kind of a real time of what's being updated at certain points of the year too. Any other thoughts? Any other bragging points somebody thought about in the middle of the training that we had?
I kind of have an announcement that's a little bit of a bragging point
Okay.
that these guys are not aware of. And I had some visitors from a company called Select Transportation come by to visit at the end of Purple Sage Drive, back behind your house, Herbert, on the far side from you, not directly behind the school, but on the west side of the road that's going to cut through back there, is a new trucking company coming in that wants to partner with us. And they're going to have possibly the biggest truck dealership in the world in Galena Park I.S.D.
Woohoo.
It will be.
And it's going to have 100 bays for diesel mechanics.
Wow.
And he wants his kids to be all ours. He wants to train them. He wants to have like a advanced training center on his property that our kids graduate to. And he said right now those people are making between $80,000 and $200,000 a year per person. And so we're about to get something going with them.
Wow.
That's good.
wow.
It's fantastic
Good news.
news. Not to mention we get a huge business vendor in our community
Community.
for all those other good reasons. But-
And one of the largest, if not the largest taxpayer in the
Right.
area.
We're
Right.
talking about the Freightliner?
Yes.
That's
Mhm.
moving in there?
Yeah,
Yeah,
And-
Freightliner, right?
it's Freightliner.
Mr. Noe knows them because he sells to them or something. I didn't know that until the guy got here and I asked him if he knew Noe, and he said, oh yeah, he's one of my vendors, so it's really, really good news. It's gonna be a great partner for us, and it's a chance for our kids to make some really, really good money.
That's
And to get some really advanced training in the world of diesel mechanics.
Super, super.
Wow, that's exciting. That is cool.
Very exciting.
Wow. That is super. Man, that is really, I'm a former career and technology director. So I was an ag teacher and then did that. So that kind of stuff excites me. That is cool for a kid. And man, what a great career.
So they're gonna open their own advanced training center on their property. So he said, like, when a kid gets out with a diesel mechanic certificate now, he said, they can work on some stuff. He said, but the new stuff is so technologically advanced that you
Yeah.
can't keep up
Up with
with it unless you're constantly training.
Yeah.
And he said, so they'll have the most advanced diesel mechanic training center there is in the world
Wow.
on their property.
Well, maybe we need to look at maybe changing not just auto mechanics, maybe diesel mechanics, or at the high school,
Right.
because that's already the auto mechanics. Both high schools is already a good program. Maybe that's something,
We partner with.
or maybe
Yeah, well,
with St. Jack or at the early head or
San
at
Jack
or the early college.
Look, man, if he needs 100 of them, we may
Yeah.
have to get creative and
Yeah.
get some more space or something. But it is really good news. It's still kind of a year out
Well,
there.
yeah.
That is
But it's really, really good news.
Should we not talk about this in the community?
No, I think it's,
Huh.
Well,
He
they're
didn't-
already
he didn't
building.
tell me they were in
Yeah, they already
sequence.
got their logos and all that out there.
Slab is
Yeah,
down.
they already started. They already got
he
it.
did not tell me that there was any, that he was really excited. So anyway,
Excellent, excellent.
Foundation
So,
partner.
There are 4 of you that need to hang around for a few minutes for the legislative update piece. I'm gonna give, well, I have the certificates for the rest of you. Would you rather me just give them to Elizabeth?
Yes. Yes.
I mean, you have your own copy here. but-
Because if not, we have to give them to her anyway.
Actually, I'm gonna.
If you give them to us, we have to give it to her.
These 4 have 3 certificates in them.
so do you need to conclude the board meeting?
I'll see you guys. You can go, you and no.
Oh, did you already?
Okay, there being no other business before the board at this time, the meeting is adjourned.